Hi, thank you for taking a look at this video today. I'm going to do some training around the Azure Calculator, or we actually prefer to call it the Azure Estimator, because what you estimate when you put this together and what you deploy could technically be two different things. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Jason Lambert. I'm an advocate of Azure Solutions, and I've been around this game in Microsoft Azure for approximately a dozen years now. And here's what I've experienced. So if you're on-prem and your customer comes up to you or calls you and says, I need to upgrade to this latest application, and I'm typically going back a number of years ago, you would have went out and got the DVD. And then you would look at the system requirements for the application that the customer had, and then probably would inform the customer that the server they currently have isn't powerful enough to run the latest, greatest application. So that put the customer in a position of needing to upgrade their hardware, and you would go out to said hardware vendors and got, for their budget, a really powerful server. Over the years, you'd probably agree with me that you're getting more CPU, more RAM, more storage at a less or a cheaper price. I'm not in the hardware game, so I apologize if that statement's not 100% true. But typically, over time, you were getting more powerful hardware, and we would introduce virtualization. We introduced VMware. And so VMware was a great way to take a really powerful server and carve it up into virtual machines that better serve the customer. So be it the virtual machines, because you can oversubscribe CPU, RAM, storage in a virtual environment. The physical machine that you're running on-prem has more CPU, RAM, and storage than the application we're looking at requires. When you take those specifications, CPU, RAM, storage, off either the physical machine on-prem or the virtual machine on-prem, and you put those numbers in the Azure Estimator, 9 times out of 10, you're coming back with sticker shock. You're looking at it going, hey, this is a lot more than what I think my customer wants to pay. You're probably presenting it to the customer's saying, hey, if I amortize that over 3 years or 5 years, it just, the math doesn't work. And so I would recommend that you stop. Let's go back to what we knew when we started this and the customer's looking for a new application and their hardware wasn't up to spec. So now we're going into Azure and they're asking you for the latest application. And what I've got on the screen in front of you is a true spec for one of the vendor applications. It's telling you that it needs 2.4 gigahertz processor, 8 gig of RAM, recommends 16, and then gives you different RAM specifications depending on how many users are going to impact that application. So I would use my professional experience. If I knew there was probably 8 or 10 users, I probably would go to 20 gigs of RAM. I probably put in more than one processor. And I would tell you, if you did an estimate based on that thought process, you'd be delivering an estimate that was more palatable for the customer. So you can use this process in every single application that the customer has on-prem, and it would be a little bit tedious. Or you could use the Azure Migrate tool, which is free within your subscription and has the ability to deploy an assessment for your on-premise environment that would then give you a report that would be more tuned to the application requirements than the physical servers. So that's Jason's 2 cents on how I would use an Azure estimate today. Stay tuned for how we do a virtual machine estimate on the Azure Calculator in just a minute. Okay, let's get moved on to the actual Azure Estimator. So from your favorite search engine, just type in Azure Calculator and it will pop up probably in the top half dozen links. And you can, once you click it, you'll come to the page that's in front of you right now. If you look at the Azure Estimator down the left side, these are all the different categories of services that Microsoft has in the Azure toolbox. I call Azure a toolbox because it gives you services that you can take advantage of. It also allows you to bring in services that may serve you better. For example, we could talk about Azure Backup. Azure Backup is a fantastic service on Azure, but maybe it's not a service that you standardized on within your practice. You may have a different vendor. You can bring that vendor solution to Azure and deploy it just like you would on-prem. Just keep in mind, and this is something that we can help you out with, if you decide to do that, you will incur egress charges for the data leaving Azure. So data going into Azure, free 100% of the time. Data coming out of Azure, there is an egress fee. I'll talk about that a little bit more as I work through the estimator demo. So if you get to the top here, you can hit example scenarios. So these are architectures that have been pre-set up for you. If you see something here that you like and you want to add it to the estimator, you just go ahead and click this button and it'll give you this pre-populated infrastructure within the estimator. If you go to the next tab, you got saved estimates. I would strongly encourage you to save the estimates that you create, even if you just, you send them to your customer. You never know when your customer comes back and says, I want to add this, I want to remove that, I want to change this. And then so you wind up making those changes, and then the customer asks you to go back to the original or a different version. It's just really easy and great to be able to get a link. So basically you save it, it creates a link, and then you can just bring it back up and it'll repopulate it and you can make any changes you want. So that's pretty cool. And if you need to copy it, you can do it too. So I'm going to go back to product. I'm not going to start with my save estimate. I've been practicing this video a couple of times, so I made one to put in there. Down this left column, you're going to see categories for a number of different solutions. For managed service providers or value-added resellers that Sherweb does business with today, I'm going to talk about what I believe are the 5 pillars that you guys will use the most. Virtual machines, storage, some networking, backup, and disaster recovery. Those are the 5 services I'm going to walk through here. There's some other stuff I'm going to talk about, but primarily I'm going to stick to that. Else it's just going to get really long and tedious. But I do want to let you know, if you are looking for help on an estimate that you're not comfortable putting together, please reach out to your Sherweb account manager and they can get you in touch with the Azure team. We do have pre-sales solution architects as well as design and deployment architects who are happy to get on a call, engage with you, and help you get the estimate done. And in turn, if we wind up getting requests for a different topic, I'm happy to put together another training video at a later date. So let's start this. At the top here, these are some popular categories of product that our customers, partners like to use in the Azure Estimator. And keep in mind, this estimator is for enterprise customers all the way down to the smallest customer that may want to go into Azure. When I say small customer, you could run a virtual machine in Azure for pennies on the dollar, literally. Like maybe, 15 cents, 25 cents an hour, 50 cents an hour. And that also depends whether you're using reserved instances or not. I'll probably talk about that a little bit when I do the virtual machine part of the estimate. But Yeah, so you're going to see some things in the estimator that you're going to be like, I got to pay for those services, and the answer is yes. It could be reads, writes, puts, gets, I/O, stuff like that. I'm going to point them out as I go. They literally will add pennies on the dollar to your estimate over time, depending on how it's consumed. I wouldn't get too worried about it or let that cause you to not sell Azure. Again, it's pennies on the dollar. It's like based on what you would actually deliver, it's negligible. All right, so let's jump in. So Azure Virtual Machines, I'm going to start there. That typically is the most popular service in Microsoft Azure. But again, as I say that, if your customer is new to Azure and you're looking to get started, the lowest hanging fruit would be Azure Backup and Azure Site Recovery. Those are two services that have been in market for probably the 8 or 10 years that Azure has been available to partners through the NCE channel. So I would start there. You're not going to make a ton of money on it, but at least it can get the customer acclimated to the service and see how well it works, especially if you're backing up to Azure, backing up offsite. You maybe have 2 or 3 different backup spaces. So if the Azure backup, for example, didn't work, you've got another backup that you could lean on. Oh, so I've already added the virtual machine here. I actually added 2. I'll go through them both. As you scroll down, you're going to see your estimate. Right here, you can name it whatever you like. So I can say customer DEF, because I already did ABC, V1, right? So I got the customer name. Then here, I can actually type in and say application ABC. I don't know, whatever application. I don't want to start calling out vendor stuff. I'm just going to try and keep that very generic for the video. So then you got your customer, you got your first server. I talked about how best to look at an application. We want to understand what the application requires from a CPU, RAM, and storage perspective, and then use our professional experience or an assessment tool to identify, hey, I got 8 or 10 people that are going to impact that application. My gut tells me that I need a little bit more CPU, RAM, storage. So you can go ahead and put that in the estimate, or I guess at any time you can, through a simple reboot, change the size of the virtual machine. So what does that mean? So I have a virtual machine with, let's say, 2 cores of CPU, and then let's say 4 gigs of RAM and some storage. And I want to change that. My customer's complaining, saying that server isn't running effectively. Through a reboot, I can go into the Azure portal. I can select the machine. I can select the next machine, a bigger machine, maybe has 4 cores, 16 gigs of RAM. And I can select that machine, say go, and through a reboot, that machine will come online and take the place of the other machine. And as soon as that happens, the pricing meter will start charging the customer at the new server rate. On the other hand, let's say you had a server that was overperforming, and maybe you're only getting 20% utilization for it. Maybe the customer had some downsizing over time. Maybe it was an application that they're moving away from. You have the ability, through a reboot, to step down to a smaller server. So you get better utilization on that application. So let's move on. So we got customer here. We've got an application. We can pick from any region that Microsoft has available on this list for our customer. Now, again, I made comment about it earlier. Any region that you can use any region as long as the invoice winds up in your country. So if it's if you're a Canadian partner of Sherweb and you have a customer that you're servicing and their invoicing is going to Canada, but they have offices around the world, you can go ahead and service all those other offices as long as that invoice resides and is billed in Canada. Again, if you're a US customer, your customer is billing in the US, you can use the entire Azure infrastructure, any country you want, as long as that invoice lands back in the USA. If it lands in a different country, and you want to take advantage of it, you have to have a presence in that country. So I just want to make sure that's absolutely clear, because I know customer partners actually have asked about it a fair bit. All right, so for simplicity, I'm going to go ahead and select US East 2. I can decide if I want to make this a Linux server or a Windows server. I'm going to go ahead and pick Linux for fun. You can put any Linux flavor on here that you want. If you have a flavor of Linux that is not listed here, you can add it to Azure. I would go ahead and use Ubuntu because there is no charge out of the gate to deploy Ubuntu. And as you can see here, it's only $70 and change to run this 2 CPU, 8 gig of RAM server with Ubuntu in the data center. From a tier perspective, I would go ahead and use standard, basic. I would use that for like test and dev. I think you get a much better price, but I wouldn't use it for production environment. I would go ahead and use standard. If I go back to the operating system and change it to Windows, I want to show you. If I go back to Windows and I go down to the bottom, I've got the Windows licensing built in here. Oh, I changed the machine. Compute. No. General CPU. I can't remember what server. It was nope. Oh, it's got to be in here. I don't know what the default server was that we started with. But the price would have obviously went up. I don't know if I can. No, I got away from it. I can delete the machine. Add it to the estimate again. All right, it's D2 V3. I didn't know what it was, but if I go back to Windows here, I come down to the bottom, it's $137. So it went from $70 with Linux to $137 with Windows. Also, if you had hybrid use benefits or software assurance, and you already own the license, but you want to understand what the cost of the machine is to run, then I would use a Linux, like Ubuntu Linux instance, and then that would show you it's only $70. If you want to bring your license, you need to have software assurance to take your on-premise license through mobility rights and be able to deploy it in Azure. Come down to the bottom here. We can go, there's different instance size, different servers. As you can see here, there's different families. All vendors that build servers and sell servers have families of servers, and some are really good at giving it a name. Microsoft just kind of assigns like alphabetical names to their servers. So you can go ahead and pick. I can send, or in the bottom, I'll attach a link if you want to go see what all the server families are. Again, if you type in your favorite search engine, Azure server families, that page will come up, but I'll put it in the bottom, make it super easy. Come down here, if I need more, so let's say this application, I changed it again, so we'll say this is app 1. If I had, let's say, 1 through 4, I could put 4 virtual machines here, as long as it's the same virtual machine type. And then you can see here the price will change based on the 4 machines. Microsoft has 730 hours in here. The way I would price this out if I was an MSP or a VAR, I would tally up 31 days. So basically 24 times 31. I don't know what the math is off the top of my head, but let's hypothetically say it's 730. Then I would charge my customer for every month for 31 days, even if it was a 30-day month, because a lot of my customers want the same price every single month. They want a static price. And that's the easiest way for me to give them a static price. So just food for thought. When you're billing your customers, you may want to do that too to help simplify the cost that goes to the customer, especially if they want a static price. You get down here, you can go pay as you go, which is everybody starts at pay as you go. We talked about license included or Azure hybrid benefits a little bit. You can also buy, if you were doing a reserved instance, you can do a software subscription, which if you do a 3-year reserve, you can do a 3-year software subscription or a 1 year and a 1 year. That may be able to get you a little bit of a better price for your customer. Savings plan is available for you. So if you're within the same family of infrastructure, you can actually do a 1 year or a 3-year savings plan where there's, for lack of a better example, a pool of funds that you put in, and you can consume against that pool of funds and change the machines as needed, required based on what your application requires. So if you need a lot of flexibility, savings plan is a pretty good way to go. If you have a steady state workload, I'm going to say like an accounting or application software that you know the customer's going to use indefinitely, they just need a machine running, then I would go down and use either a 1 year or a 3-year reserved instance. You can, on this machine type, you can get up to 62% on a 3-year reserve, and then your customer price would go down. You know, if I click that button, I'm going to go from $548 to $376 a month for the same machine based on a reserve. As of today, and I can only speak of day by day, if you look out for Microsoft refund and cancellation page, they do have the opportunity to put a 12% cancellation fee on the servers. So let's say if you did a 3-year reserved instance in 2 years, the customer doesn't want it anymore, you could have put a 12% cancellation fee from Microsoft on that, and you would pay 12% of the remainder of the bill for cancellation. But as of today, Microsoft has not enforced a cancellation policy around reserved instances. So if I was an MSP, I would go ahead and probably on any static state workload, I would put a 3-year reserved on it, knowing that I can cancel at any time without any fee. And we can link that down at the bottom of the video as well. So we're down to the bottom, and there are the ability, and this is completely up to you, to do managed disk, storage. Well, storage transactions, again, I made comment, there may be transactions that happen that really don't impact you. So if you actually drop this down, if I put 10 storage transactions times 10,000, I think that's 100,000 storage transactions, which is probably, way more than your customer would ever need. Microsoft's going to charge you a penny. Like, it's really irrelevant. So I wouldn't get too caught up in these additional transaction fees, as I said earlier. Bandwidth, that's another call out. I personally, if I was doing this estimate, I would call it out separately, and I'll show you how you can do that. It makes it easy when you look at the estimate. You'll say, here's my virtual machine, here's my storage, here's my bandwidth fees, here's my VPN fee, here's my backup fee, rather than clumping it all together in, like, if you did it all through what you're seeing right now, it would all show up in the same line. And then you'd have to, you'd probably call it out to your customer, maybe the sales rep, to make sure you've got all the right pieces. So I would go back up to the top here. Let me talk to you real quick before I move on to storage. When you do an estimate on the estimator, you're going to see this temporary storage here called out. This is ephemeral storage. It's not persistent storage. It is created, and the only way I've explained it, I've talked to Microsoft people about it, and no one's given me a better explanation. It's basically the storage that's on the physical server. So the physical servers that Microsoft deploy have to have CPU, RAM, and storage to run. So you will get some temporary storage. You could use cache on it. You could use page file. You can put anything on it that you do not care to keep. But if it's important customer data, do not use the temporary storage. And it will be called out if you look at the Windows Explorer. When you log into the virtual machine, it will be called out as, I believe, the D drive. And then if you add additional storage, it would be like EE drive or any other letter of the alphabet other than C. So I wanted to leave that with you and let you know right now, based on this quote, and I'm going to go back to one, and I'm going to put one machine, just so everything on the quote lines up right and we understand the price. So this one here, what do I get to? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, I got a 3-year reserve. So I'm going to go back to pay as you go. So it's $137. But this machine does not have an operating system drive called out to be consumed. So what I would do, and just so I'm calling it out properly, I'm going to go up to the top. I'm going to add a storage account. You're going to see there's a little pop out. Makes it really easy if you have like a really long estimate. You can just hit that link and it'll take you to the bottom. So that's thumbs up as far as making it simple. Okay, so we've got our virtual machine in US East. I'm going to put our storage. So I'm going to make this, app 1 OS drive. Right? So I'm saying this virtual machine is app 1. App 1, this is the OS drive. I'm going to go ahead. Block blob storage is, think of it kind of like they're SMB storage arrays. It's my understanding. And there is a lot of space. I believe you can put over a petabyte of storage on your subscription through Azure. And think of it like thin provisioning. So although I may put a terabyte of storage and it will look like through Windows Explorer that I have a terabyte of storage, maybe an E drive, on the server, I actually only pay for the storage I really consume. So if I have a terabyte and only consume 50 gigs, I'm only going to be charged for the 50 gigs I consume. Mind you, block blob storage is not the fastest storage available, but it's probably more on the cheaper side. Back in the day when Azure first came to market, they didn't have managed disk, so that's all the storage we had to use, and customers were able to consume it fine. There's table storage, there's queue storage. I'm not going to get into all of those because I don't know they definitely impact virtual machines. Azure files. So if you wanted to create a files, maybe you have a file server on-prem and you want to back it up to the cloud, you can use Azure files to do that. And you could even set up a retention policy that so let's say it was a terabyte and you want 75% of that or 60% of that up in the cloud and back up, and then the remaining 40% on-prem and available for easy consumption. Maybe it's the stuff that employees use every day. You can go ahead and set up that policy in Azure File. You can also have Azure File up in Azure. It could be a file server, and what it would do is entitle you to map out a drive to your users' computers or the servers that you want. So it's a file storage system. I'm going to go down here to manage disk, and then so I've got my virtual machine. I can use standard spinning disk, cheap SSD. Actually, it's not cheap. It's enterprise class, entry level SSD. I'll say that it's probably better. And then you got premium SSD, higher than that, then ultra disk. For the standard server I'm running an application on, you'd probably want to pick either standard SSD or premium SSD. This locally redundant storage would be 3 copies of your data in 3 default tolerant locations within the same data center. Zone redundant storage would be 3 copies of your data in 3 different availability zones or data centers within the Azure region. So as I said, I think earlier, or maybe on a different training, every region has a minimum of 3 data centers or availability zones in Azure. Some of them have more. So then I can come down here and I can pick, so E series SSD storage. So I'm going to pick 128 gig for my OS drive. Oh, you can notice here it's $14.40 for zone redundant storage. For locally redundant storage, it's only $9.60. I knew that price, but when I saw it was $14, I had to figure out why. And then you got storage transactions. This is calling out, I don't know, 1 million transactions for 20 cents. Again, this is it's not worth arguing or wrestling over. If I just, I bring it down to 10, it's going to cost me 2 cents. It's not a big deal. So I got my storage my OS drive. If I wanted to add in an additional, maybe a data drive, I can come in here. I could pick block storage again. It's going to be standard block storage, premium, faster, more expensive. General purpose V2 data center. If I pick V2, I believe it's a little bit more expensive than V1. 24. What do I do? Oh, yeah. Oh, I see that just changed around. Yeah. You can talk about your file structure. You got different tiers, whether it's hot, always available storage, cool storage is not so much available. Take a little bit more time to get back. A little bit cheaper. Cold storage is, again, cheaper and hard. Well, I don't want to say harder. Just takes you longer to get that data back. So if the customer needs it right away, it'll take a hot minute. Actually, it might take a day or 2 to get it back. Dang it. And then archival storage would be more or less the cheapest storage and the longest to get it back. So if your customer was maybe they had to keep data for 7 years or, 70 years, they could use archival storage as long as they knew it was going to take them a couple of days to get the data back if they needed it. Again, you got, different data redundancy. I talked about LRS and CRS. GRS is geographically redundant storage. RA is read-only. Geographically redundant storage. And then I can't remember what the last 2 are, but I can certainly add the page in a link where you can go in and learn those other 2 redundancies. So I've got here, I'm going to put in 1024 because I want actually a terabyte. And then I could do 1 or 3 year reserved, and then I'm down with write operations, list create, read operations, all other operations, data retrieval, data write. Again, I think I'm beating a dead horse here, but if I just put down like 10,000, it's a nickel. You're not, like, as you look here, it's 50 cents, but I could put that probably to a 1, 2. So for, pennies on the dollar, yes, I'm going to get charged some of these fees, but I wouldn't sweat it. So, okay. Oh, I also want to say this is a storage account. I may say app data data drive. I've got it listed here. I've got my OS drive, my data drive. Now I may want to do backup. I can go ahead since backup isn't in the list and it's not under these, I know it's down further. I don't remember. I'll just go ahead and type in backup or back. I can add to the estimate. I'll go down to where it's located. I'm going to back up Azure VMs. I'm going to put in, it'll just be standard backup, one machine. I need to back up, let's say, 200 gigs of data because I've got my OS data that I want to back up and, maybe 100 gigs of storage, even though I've said more, I'm only consuming. So that's all I really want to back up. So how Azure Backup works is from 1 to 50 gigs, Microsoft charges $5 a month. From 50 to 500 gigs, they charge $10 a month. And then every increment of 500 gigs or anything over, so if I did 501 gigs, I would be charged an additional $10, and that would scale all the way up to a terabyte. So if I had a terabyte, or let's say a terabyte and a half of storage on the Azure that I wanted to back up, it would cost me 10, 20, 30. No, wait, yeah, 10, 20, 30 bucks a month for backup. But that's not including data. And so when you get down here, you can see, I'll talk about data in a minute, but you get 30-day. Right now, we're going to back up for 30 days. I want to keep it for 1 week. I want to keep it for 1 month. I want to keep it for 1 year. My churn is going to be rather low. I'm going to have 260 gigs is kind of the estimate based on the calculator. Based on the tier, I'm going to get 15 gigs here, etc. I'm doing LRS. I could do GRS. That should change my price. Yeah, it did. It doubled my price. I went from $582 to $1165. But there's my Azure Backup. Now I want to call out bandwidth. So I'm going to add that to my estimate. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say from interregion, I'm going to do internet egress because it's going out to the web, going from US East, and it's not on the network. It's going out to the internet. So typically, and I'm asking you to keep me honest, for the last 8 to 10 years that I've been around infrastructure, hyperscalers, I've told partners, if your customer has hypothetically 20 to 25 users, their egress charge would be roughly 300 gigs, well, somewhere around 300 gigs. They may go over or under, and I usually say it's like a latte at your favorite, coffee shop, right? Like $5, up or down. And I've asked my partners, and I'm asking you, if that's not true, and if your customer does get a bill, let's say for 20 or 30 or 50 bucks, I would love to know because I don't want to be misleading. But what I'm trying to do here is help customer partners talk to their customers who have never had to deal with bandwidth before. And the thought is usually, oh my gosh, I don't know what it's going to cost me. And, because I don't know how to equate a dollar to it, I don't want to do it. And that may put the customer off going to Azure. So I put my foot in the ground. I'm saying roughly 300 gigs. You can see here it's roughly $16. It's not really expensive. If they hit 400 gigs, they're going to go up to 24 bucks. So it's like $8 per 100 gigs. It's not, super crazy. All right, so we got bandwidth. Oh, well, your customer doesn't want to just willy-nilly see stuff across the internet. They probably want a VPN. So I'm going to add a VPN to my estimate. And it's US East, that's great. VPN Gateway, basic VPN. I'm going to put in the 730 hours that was on the server side that we estimated. Here you could, again, estimate for 31 days. 31 days out of the month, and make every month 31 days. And that makes a more consistent bill for your customer. And you get the upside benefit, not a lot, but you get, for every day that you get, there's only 30 days, you get 24 hours worth of consumption. You don't have to pay for, but you charge your customer for. So this VPN's 100 megs up and down. You can have that set up. It's relatively easy to deploy. Cost your customer $26 and change per month. If your customer needs a bigger VPN, there are a bunch of different size VPNs. Again, I can add a link to VPNs in the description, and you can click to it and understand what the different VPN sizes are. I'm not going to go through every one, but I can tell you that depending on the VPN, it will also set expectation on your point-to-point or site-to-point and site-to-site connections. So if you had a customer who had multiple offices and they want multiple site-to-sites, you've got to pay attention to that in which VPN that you pick, because not all of them will support, if you needed 20 or 30 site-to-site connections, I think you'd be up probably GW2 or higher. And if you need, I believe, Basic will do 128 point-to-site connections. So if you have remote employees in this day and age, and you want them to connect directly into Azure and be able to get connected to whatever infrastructure they want, you get up to 128 with no additional charge on the VPN. So based on the $27 VPN, I believe you get 128 point-to-sites and 10 site-to-sites off the top of my head. Then down here, well, I've already done the bandwidth piece, so I'm not going to bother filling out the outbound data transfer fee. I'm not going to worry about it. We could go to ExpressRoute. So let's say your customer gets to a size, or they would prefer to have something more like an MPLS connection. I don't think the two of them are the same. Like an ExpressRoute and an MPLS, they're not the same. But basically, an ExpressRoute connection terminates from Azure to your local provider. So I guess it would be your colocation or your maybe telephony provider. And then, so that connection would be charged through the estimator. Then the last mile from that provider out to your customer, that would be an additional fee that you would have to reach out to the provider and negotiate for your customer to get connectivity. It will give you better performance, better throughput than a standard VPN. A lot of the ExpressRoute connections also include ingress and egress data, or maybe a percentage of ingress and egress data. I can leave, again, a link in the description so you can learn more about ExpressRoute. I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but there are, I think, 4 or 5 listed here that you could take advantage of, starting, from as little as $138 all the way up to, $1,570 a month for service. So I got a VPN Gateway. I did Azure Backup, kind of reversed or changed order a little bit. Actually, I'm going to turn this back to just a standard VPN. And then the last piece would be site recovery. So I'm going to type in Azure site recovery. I'm going to add that to the estimate. I'm going to view my estimate. And then we come down here. It's still in US East, so I'm going to do site recovery to US East. I could do site recovery to any region I want. So I could have my infrastructure in US East and then do backup or DR, ASR to US East 2. So they're still on the east side of the United States, but in 2 different regions, 450 miles or greater, one from the other. And we come down here. If I wanted to use Azure Site Recovery and my customer had an on-premise facility and a colocation facility, and they didn't want to use Azure, but they do want to use the technology, that's available. That's what this first box is for. So you just put the number of servers down that you want to do ASR for, and it'll give you $16 times the number of servers. If you want to do from on-prem to Azure, you can go ahead and do that through here, and it's $25 per server. Yeah, replicating your on-prem machine, either virtual machine, physical machine, VMware, Hyper-V, physical server, replicating that into Azure. So you just want to be careful. You're replicating these workloads in Azure through ASR. You need to make sure you get to do a planned or an unplanned failover. And there are steps that you could put in place. So I could start my planned failover. It automates like 2 or 3 tasks. Then I say I need to double check. So stop. And then once I double check, they can proceed on to the next tasks. The other thing to keep in mind is if you have Active Directory on premises, you may want to have an Active Directory set up in Azure so that if you do fail over, that AD has already been in sync with the on-prem AD. And when those Azure servers come back online, they know how to connect and how to, move data around the network. And I would also encourage you to create a fee, maybe a day rate, so that the customer understands. So they're paying $25 for the replication process plus the cost of storage. Then if the customer needed, so they're not in failover, that say a couple of machines have to go into failover, what's the cost of service for the sake of a day, right? So that you could calculate the customer's going to go into failover for 3 days. They know what their daily pay rate is. And on the 4th day, they come back up on, you help them maybe replace a server on-prem, and then you recover from cloud, from Azure back to on-prem, and the customer's back up in production. Only took them 3 days to get there. You'd want to make sure you have a rate. So on both ASR and Azure Backup, you will have a data charge for the storage stored in the Azure data center. So I basically have gone through virtual machines, storage accounts, backup, bandwidth, VPN. What else am I missing? I don't think I did VPN, Express Route, and Azure Site Recovery. So I think I've covered the majority of the topics for the presentation. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this provides some help as far as how to get through an Azure estimator, how to save it, set it up in such a way that it makes it easy. Oh, I didn't show you, so I can save this estimator or this estimate, right? Go ahead, save it for what I want it to be. I can also export it. So if I export it, it will actually go to Excel. Let's see if I can open the file here. Let me grab it, drag it over here, and then let me here. So there's our Excel estimate. As you can see across the top, there's your first server, the OS drive, the data drive, Azure Backup. Oh, it's under management and governance in the left column of the estimator. That's I didn't realize that. And then in the description is going to tell you all about the service. And here I didn't go through the bandwidth part, so it actually says it's going from US East to East Asia, which isn't right, because we took advantage of the bandwidth down here where I said it's going from US East to the public internet. I should have flipped that so that in the estimator. Okay, so there's your backup, your data drive. Some of this stuff here, when I was doing estimates more often, I would get rid of all this other stuff, because it isn't really relevant. Again, pennies on the dollar. networking, VPN, right? $26. This is what it includes. USC's 2. This pricing and the pricing on the estimator is all retail pricing. It's your customer would get the same. Everybody that if somebody took that estimate and rebuilt it, they should basically get the same price unless Microsoft does a price change. So you got your price down at the bottom. From a perspective of support, if you do business with Sherweb and you need support in Azure, pre-sale support we do. I've already talked about it. Reach out if you need help with an estimate, putting it together. You're not sure where to start. If you put one together, you want a second set of eyes on it. We can certainly help. We want to understand your opportunity, and so understanding the opportunity isn't just about this one Azure solution. We also want to understand, is the customer doing 365? Is the customer, they're doing Azure? Are they doing, there's other services that we can sell with you or through you to the customer, and we want to make sure that we capitalize the opportunities that are there for you, with you. They may not want to change right away, but they may not want to change at all. But we want to make sure that we're helping you expose opportunities that you take advantage of. All right. I think that does it for me. Once again, thank you. Appreciate you investing the time here today. And if you have any questions, reach out to your account manager. They can reach out to the Azure team. The Azure team can reach out to me. Have a great day, and hope to talk to you soon. Thank you.